Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the smell of warm dust and distant pine on a mountain breeze, and somewhere ahead of you, the sound of a boy laughing, a boy who would one day make the whole world hold its breath. This is the story of Alexander, and it is one of the most extraordinary stories ever lived. We begin in a city called Pella, in the ancient kingdom of Macedon, in the northern reaches of what we now call Greece. The year is 356 BC. The hills are golden in the summer heat, and in the royal palace a child is born to a king named Philip and a fierce, proud woman named Olympias. They name him Alexander. From the very beginning, there is something electric about him. Even as a small boy, he moves through the world as if it belongs to him, not out of arrogance exactly, but out of a kind of burning certainty. He is bold where other children are cautious. He is curious where they are afraid. He looks at the map of the known world and doesn't see boundaries. He sees possibilities. His father, King Philip, is no ordinary man himself. Philip has already transformed Macedon from a rough peripheral kingdom into a genuine military power, and he wants his son shaped accordingly. So when Alexander is around 13 years old, Philip does something remarkable. He hires the greatest mind in the ancient world to tutor his boy. He hires Aristotle. Imagine that for a moment. A young Alexander sitting under the shade of an olive tree, while the philosopher Aristotle, the man who essentially invented the study of logic, biology, politics and poetry, opens the world of ideas to him. They talk about medicine and the stars. They discuss the nature of the soul and the behavior of animals. Aristotle gives Alexander a love of Homer, particularly the Iliad, the great epic of war and glory, and the hero Achilles. Alexander keeps a copy of it his entire life, tucking it under his pillow at night alongside a dagger. He doesn't just read about Achilles. He wants to be Achilles. Those years with Aristotle shape him in ways no battlefield ever could. He learns to think. He learns to question. He learns that the world is vast and strange and full of things worth knowing. But the world does not let him stay a student for long. When Alexander is just 20 years old, his father Philip is assassinated at a royal celebration, murdered by one of his own bodyguards in a moment of chaos and intrigue. The throne of Macedon passes to Alexander almost overnight, and the young man who had been reading philosophy under the Mediterranean sun suddenly finds himself king of a restless, ambitious kingdom, surrounded by enemies who assume that a 20-year-old boy can be easily managed. They are wrong. Within weeks, Alexander moves with a speed and decisiveness that shocks everyone around him. He secures his throne. He deals firmly with potential rivals, and then, before anyone can fully settle into the idea of this new young king, he begins to march. First, he sweeps north into the Balkans, reasserting Macedonian control over Thrace and Illyria, regions that had sensed an opportunity in the transition of power and had grown unruly. He crushes any resistance swiftly, with the kind of tactical brilliance that will become his signature. Then he turns south to Thebes, a great and proud Greek city that had rebelled. The message Alexander sends is deliberate and devastating. Thebes is destroyed. The point is made. No one else tests him after that. He is now the undisputed leader of a unified Greece, holding authority over the League of Corinth, an alliance his father had built and which Alexander now steers with his own hand. And that hand is already pointing east. For decades, the Persian Achaemenid Empire had loomed over the Greek world like a shadow. The Persians had invaded Greece before, burned Athens, fought at Thermopylae. The memory was still raw, still humiliating. Alexander frames his next great campaign as a reckoning, a pan-Hellenic crusade to settle the old score. In 334 BC, Alexander leads his army across the narrow stretch of water that separates Europe from Asia, the Hellespont. You can almost hear the oars cutting through the dark blue water, the soft creak of the ships, the low murmur of thousands of soldiers wondering what awaits them on the other side. Before he disembarks, Alexander does something telling. He throws his spear into the Asian soil from the prow of his ship, claiming the continent symbolically before his feet have even touched the ground. Then he goes ashore and visits the ancient city of Troy. He makes an offering at the tomb of Achilles. This is who he is. He is not simply a general executing a military strategy. He is a young man on a mythic quest, chasing something larger than victory, chasing a kind of immortality. And the battles begin. The first major engagement comes at the Granicus River, where Persian forces try to stop his advance. Alexander doesn't hesitate. He leads from the front, plunging directly into the thickest part of the fighting, his white-plumed helmet making him unmissable, and a target. He nearly dies. A Persian commander raises a sword above his head, and it is only a companion who rides in at the last moment and saves him. Alexander barely blinks. He keeps fighting. The Persian forces break. Alexander presses into Asia Minor, what we now call Turkey, liberating Greek cities along the coast, many of them welcoming him with genuine relief and celebration. Then comes Issus in 333 BC. This is the battle that changes everything. The Persian king Darius III himself leads his forces, an enormous army, vastly outnumbering Alexander's. They meet on a narrow coastal plain near the sea, and Alexander makes a choice that seems almost reckless. He identifies where Darius is standing among his troops, and he rides directly for him, not around him, not toward his flanks, straight at the king. The audacity of it is breathtaking. The Persian lines crumble. Darius flees in his chariot, leaving behind his mother, his wife, his daughters, his entire family, in a panic of retreat. Alexander, when he reaches the Persian royal tent, treats the captured family with complete courtesy and respect. He is a conqueror who understands the theatre of power. Darius sends peace offers. Alexander dismisses them. He has no interest in half the world. He intends to have it all. He turns south along the coast, taking city after city. In Egypt, something remarkable happens. The Egyptians, long chafing under Persian rule, welcome him as a liberator. The priests of the great oracle at the Siwa oasis go even further. They greet him as the son of the god Ammon, the Egyptian equivalent of Zeus. Alexander accepts this with evident pleasure. He founds a city on the Egyptian coast and names it after himself, Alexandria. It will one day become one of the greatest cities in the ancient world. He continues east. And in 331 BC, on a wide flat plain called Gaugamela, near what is now northern Iraq, the final reckoning with Persia arrives. Darius has assembled a truly staggering force, chariots with scythes on their wheels, war elephants, hundreds of thousands of soldiers. He has carefully chosen the terrain, wide and flat, giving his cavalry room to sweep around Alexander's flanks. He is ready this time. He is prepared, and Alexander still beats him. The Battle of Gaugamela is a masterpiece of tactical genius. Alexander feints, draws the Persian cavalry away from the center, opens a gap, and drives his companion cavalry like a spear directly into it. Again, heading straight for Darius. Again, Darius flees. The Persian Empire, the greatest power the world has ever known, shatters like old pottery. Alexander walks into the ancient city of Persepolis, the ceremonial heart of the Persian Empire, and the world holds its breath. The years that follow carry him further than any Greek had ever gone, through the mountains of Afghanistan, through the baking plains of Central Asia, past the edges of the maps Aristotle had shown him as a boy. His men build roads where there are none. They cross rivers in winter. They fight in deserts and in mountain passes where the air is so thin it makes your lungs ache. And Alexander never stops. He founds city after city, blending Greek culture with the cultures he encounters, wearing Persian dress, adopting local customs, infuriating some of his Macedonian commanders, but also weaving something new and unprecedented, a civilization that is neither fully Greek nor fully Eastern, but something entirely its own. In 326 BC, he crosses into India. At the Hydaspes River, swollen with monsoon rains, he faces an Indian king named Porus, who commands a formidable force complete with war elephants. The crossing itself is a feat of military genius, conducted at night in a storm to conceal the movement. The battle that follows is fierce and difficult, and Porus fights with tremendous courage. When the Indian king is finally brought before Alexander, still proud, still regal despite his defeat, Alexander asks him how he wishes to be treated. Porus looks at him and says simply, "Like a king." Alexander smiles. He lets Porus keep his kingdom. He makes him an ally. It is one of the most human moments in all of his campaigns. But something is breaking. His men are exhausted. They have been marching for a decade. They are thousands of miles from home, in a country of monsoon rains and strange creatures, and an enemy that seems to have no end. When Alexander presses to go further, to see what lies beyond the next river, to reach the great outer ocean he has dreamed of since childhood, his generals resist. His soldiers sit down in their tents and refuse to move. For 3 days, Alexander sulks. He waits for them to change their minds. They do not. It is the first time in his life that the world has said no to him, and it breaks something inside him. He agrees to turn back. They begin the long, brutal march home, through scorching deserts and terrible hardships. And somewhere in the long road back, grief finds him. His closest friend in all the world, perhaps the only person who truly knew him, was a man named Hephaestion. They had grown up together. They had campaigned together for a decade. Hephaestion was, in ways that mattered deeply, the other half of Alexander's self. In the city of Ecbatana, Hephaestion falls ill, and then, with terrible swiftness, he dies. Alexander's grief is immense, almost uncontainable. He orders a vast and magnificent funeral pyre prepared in Babylon. He orders public mourning across the empire. He cuts his hair short, the ancient way of honoring the dead. He is said to have lain beside his friend's body and wept without restraint. Something dims in him after that. The fire is still there, but it burns differently now, lower, quieter, and somehow sadder. He makes it to Babylon, the ancient city of Nebuchadnezzar, where he plans to make his capital. He dreams of new campaigns, Arabia next, then perhaps further west. His mind is still spinning with plans, still chasing that horizon. But in June of 323 BC, Alexander falls ill. He had been drinking heavily one evening, a great banquet with friends, and over the following days, a fever takes hold. His condition worsens. Word spreads through the palace, through the city, through the army. Soldiers line up one by one to file past his sickbed. By the time they pass him, he can no longer speak. He lifts his hand weakly as each man goes by, meeting their eyes. They weep. These men who had fought lions alongside him, who had crossed frozen mountain passes and scorching deserts, they stand by their king's bed and weep. On either the 10th or 11th of June, 323 BC, Alexander III of Macedon dies. He is 32 years old. His generals gather around the body and ask the dying king, or perhaps the already silent king, who should inherit his empire. The answer, as history has it, is both poetic and devastating. To the strongest, he is said to have whispered, or perhaps he said nothing at all. Perhaps there was only silence. What killed him? The question has never been fully answered. Typhoid fever is the most common medical suggestion. Some speak of heavy drinking wearing down a body already scarred by years of wounds. There are those who whisper of poison, of enemies who feared the summons to Babylon, who arranged for something bitter to be slipped into his wine. The truth is lost to time, somewhere in the dust of that ancient palace. What is not lost is what he left behind. In just over a decade of conquest, Alexander had created one of the largest empires the world had ever seen, stretching from Greece to the edge of India, from the Danube to the sands of Egypt. He had founded more than 20 cities, the greatest of which, Alexandria in Egypt, became a beacon of learning and culture for centuries. The great library that rose there would one day hold the collected knowledge of the ancient world. More than territory, he spread something invisible, but lasting. The Greek language travelled east with his armies, becoming the common tongue of commerce and culture across half the world. Greek ideas, Greek art, Greek philosophy mingled with Persian and Egyptian and Indian traditions to create something new, a Hellenistic civilization that didn't belong to one people, but to many. It shaped Roman culture, which shaped European culture, which in quiet ways shapes the world even now. The Greek of Alexander's world became the language in which the New Testament was written. It became the language of the Byzantine Empire for nearly 1,000 years after his death. In certain corners of Pakistan and Afghanistan, you can still find communities whose ancestors were Greek settlers of his cities, whose folk traditions carry echoes of that ancient world. His tactics are still studied in military academies. His campaigns are still analyzed by generals and historians. Centuries of leaders, Julius Caesar, Napoleon, countless others, measured themselves against his shadow. He became, in the traditions of many cultures, not just a historical figure, but a myth. The Alexander Romance, a collection of stories about his life and deeds, was translated into nearly every language in Europe and the Islamic world. After the Bible, it was the most widely read book in the medieval world. He had wanted to be Achilles, to live forever in story. In that, at least, he succeeded beyond any reasonable dreaming. And so we come to rest here, in the quiet after the story. Think of that boy in Pella, listening to Aristotle describe the shape of the world. Think of him sailing across the Hellespont with a spear in his hand and a copy of Homer tucked somewhere close. Think of the thundering cavalry charge at Gaugamela and the still, courteous moment when Porus said, "like a king." Think of the firelight in a tent at the edge of India and a man sitting with the weight of an impossible dream pressing down on him, knowing he has to turn back. Think of what it means to burn so brightly and to burn so briefly. The ancient world is quiet now. The dust has long since settled over Babylon and Persepolis and Pella. The campfires are cold, the armies are still. But somewhere in the long chain of everything that came after, in the books we read, the languages we speak, the ideas we take for granted, a little of that fire is still glowing, warm and distant, like a lantern seen through fog at the end of a long road. Let that be the last image you carry with you tonight, not the battles, not the glory, but a small, steady light in the dark, proof that one life, lived with extraordinary purpose, can warm the world for thousands of years. Rest now. The story will keep until morning.